What's up guys, TSJAwesome 628 here, back again with another F1 2020 My Team Career Mode, this time for the Mexican Grand Prix. I'm going to sort out our activity timeline to start with. We're just going to put some power team building in for the 2 days we have, and then we're going to advance on to the next Grand Prix.
Think carefully who you select. While you will receive a claim for beating them, you'll lose a claim if you fail to do so.
So what have you got against practice sessions? Even if you're confident in your setup, these sessions are still useful for development data.
Yeah, so we were being reminded about the rivalry that we're not currently in because we beat Alex Albon last episode. For the weather forecast, another weekend that's completely dry. Shouldn't really be any effects. It's going to be mainly sunny, and Carl's also just reminding us that we have a high cash balance. I forgot in the last 2 episodes to show this. This is the new updated performance car. Mercedes, quickest car, and Racing Point are just ahead of Red Bull in second. We're now in 4th, just ahead of Ferrari. Actually, no, we're not even just ahead of Ferrari. We're just behind Red Bull and Racing Point. Then there's a slight gap to Ferrari, Renault and McLaren that are really close together. But there is a close gap between Ferrari and us. And then there's AlphaTauri is sort of on their own. They're much quicker than the 3 slowest cars of Alfa Romeo, Haas and Williams, but they're not quick enough to really challenge McLaren. So we'll see how the performance chart affects races in the future. As you saw in the last couple of episodes, Red Bull and Ferrari have struggled a bit more. And as we head into qualifying, we'll see whether that trend continues, because I don't think Ferrari have scored in the last 2 races. And I don't think Red Bull scored in USA either. Mexico is a decent track. It's a good track for me, a track that I'm reasonably strong at compared to the AI, and a track that I enjoy driving around. As we come to the end of that, we have a bit of traffic of George Russell, but we still manage to go fastest for now. And considering there is a 3 slowest teams in F1, I don't need to do a second run in pretty much any time, because as we'll see when we scroll down, there is again quite a large gap from Grosjean to Fiat, 3/10 or so, and the Haas, Alfa Romeos and Williams all got knocked out in Q1, as they did in USA. But so there weren't any shocks in this session. I mean, Lewis Hamilton was quite low down in P9, but that doesn't really make a difference, as he still managed it through. So let's go on to Q2. I'll start the lap for Q2, and it should be a session we should be able to make it through to Q3 as per usual. I don't see a reason why we shouldn't be able to, as I'm expecting of the 6 cars that go out in this session, there to be the 2 AlphaTauris and 4 of the Renaults, McLarens and Ferraris, but that may be slightly different. As we come round the final corner, quicker lap, I think it was just about quicker, it may have been slightly slower, I'm not sure, than we're setting Q1. It was roughly equal, it was 0.5. I thought it was slightly quicker, but maybe it was equal. We did top the session though. Jack Aitken didn't just get knocked down P11, as did Lance Stroll and Alex Albon. So that was a big shock to see that both Ferraris and both McLarens made it through, and one of the Renaults of Ricardo also just about made it through. Because theoretically you'd expect Aitken, Stroll and Albon to all make it through to the next session with the cars they have. Ocon really struggled, and he was behind Pierre Gasly in one of the AlphaTauri, so that's very good qualifying for Pierre Gasly to out-qualify one of the drivers of the cars above. And everyone's starting on soft, so let's get into Q3. We have our first lap in Q3 then, and I was sort of pushing for Q1 and Q2, but not trying to push too hard because you want to keep the tyres alright, because obviously the Q2 tyres you start the race on. So this is Q3 where the laps really matter. The first laps are just banker laps where you just needed to make it through to the session. And you already see that we're already purple in sector 1, and as you come round the final corner, we managed to improve by 4/10 on either of our laps in Q1 or Q2, and that's going to give us provisional pole position as we are in P1. And as we go towards the end of the session, we're still in P1, just ahead of Hamilton, Perez and Bottas. So Perez is showing that the racing points can be good, but Lance Stroll didn't show that because he got knocked out in Q2. But Perez is currently splitting the Mercedes. I do expect Bottas to improve though. I also hope that we can improve, because we don't have a massive gap over Hamilton, it's a few tenths. But we are improving as we head through the first few corners. And we go purple again in sector 1 and purple also in sector 2. And we improved by about 4/10 at the end to claim pole position at the Mexico Grand Prix.
Ready for tomorrow's race, but before we begin, let's have a quick look at those who will be fronting the grid. Thomas, Bottas and Lewis Hamilton. Goodbye for now then, but we're really just getting started. Make sure to join us again for Lights Out tomorrow.
So we end up claiming pole position by 7/10 after improving by 4/10 on our second lap, the only man into the 112s. Bottas, I did say he could improve. He did improve and he went P2, jumping both Hamilton and Perez. And Ricciardo was only 1,000th behind Perez in the end, so a great performance by him in the Renault. I do believe Bottas can win the championship this Grand Prix, but I think he needs to outscore Hamilton by a few points. I can't remember how many. Of course, it's always good. You get to show whether the car's good, and if it is good, you will be at the front. I do think Williams are working harder. They are getting much closer to Alfa Romeo and Haas over the season. They obviously start off right at the back of the grid.
Yesterday's exciting qualifying session. Thomas lines up on pole position and Valtteri Bottas will line up alongside. As we continue through the rest of the grid today, we have Hamilton, Perez, Daniel Ricciardo and Verstappen, Sainz, Vettel, Leclerc and Jack Aitken, Stroll, Gasly, Esteban Ocon and Grosjean, Raikkonen, Albon. They'll be starting further back after an earlier grid penalty. Lando Norris and Antonio Giovinazzi, Russell, Kvyat, Magnussen and Nicholas Latifi.
So it is a 2-stop for this Grand Prix, which probably suits us considering our tyre wear. I think we're better at circuits where a 2-stop is the best option. But that is roughly what we're just going to do, softs, medium softs it looks like, and we're going to see whether we can get a decent start or not. And we start off with an alright start. It is a very long run into turn 1. Bottas pulls alongside us on the way into turn 1, and Hamilton also pulls alongside on the inside, and we're going to get squeezed in the middle here. Bottas goes very deep into turn 1, completely outbraking himself, and we reclaim the lead. And Perez momentarily went up to P2 and then dropped back down to P4. So, an eventful start, and I think Bottas could have had the lead there had he not outbroken himself. But we come on to the end of lap 1, we've pulled a 1.3 second gap on Lewis Hamilton, who is currently P2. And it's looking good for us right now. And if we can slowly start pulling away as we are on this straight, we pulled about 3/10 on this straight alone, which is pretty good to see. Our straight line speed is decent. At the end of lap 2, the gap is now 2.2 seconds, and we're just trying to pull away here. And I think that that's going to be the best strategy for us, to just try and get an early lead. So we carry on going and move forward through, and we eventually get to the end of lap 3. 2.8 seconds now the gap, but Hamilton gains a bit of time on the exit, and well, it seems at the moment like we're pulling away from Hamilton, who's just keeping Bottas behind him, who's pulling away from Perez, who's pulling away from Ricciardo. And it just seems like we're all stretching outwards a bit as the end of lap 4 rolls around, and the gap is now 3.2 seconds to Hamilton. Obviously I do know my tyre wear is slightly worse, so we're going to see how that correlates in this race. And we managed to still pull away a few tenths on lap 5, but the amount that we're pulling away is decreasing. And I do immediately check the tyres, they're about 30%, which is alright for now, 6 laps in. And the gap at the end of lap 6 is 3.6 to Hamilton. But he does gain a bit back on the straight, and this is where it's starting to just even out. We're not gaining that much on him, as Kevin Magnussen retires from the Grand Prix in the Haas. So, disappointment for him, but I don't think he was anywhere near the points. So, don't think it matters too much in the context of this race. Carlos Sainz is now in P5, as we're debating whether we should come in for an early stop. And as we head towards the end of that, I decide we are going to go for a different kind of 2-stop. We're going to go on to 2 sets of mediums, and I think it's the best way to consistently have pace for the rest of this race. So at the end of lap 8 we did come in. We're going to be the first person into the pits, I think the only person that's coming in this lap. And we're going to go on to 2 14 lap stints of mediums. We're going to come out in this gap just behind Charles Leclerc and just ahead of Lando Norris. So a good bit of clean air that I managed to find here. Well, clean air of 2.5 seconds to the next car. And as we head into turn 1, we're just going to continue pushing through and just try and catch up to Leclerc. We probably should be near him by the end of this lap, like about to overtake him, if we want good pace, and that's exactly what we are. Is right at the end of the lap, we are looking to overtake him, and we're going to activate our DRS. Verstappen and Vettel both came into the pits at the end of that lap, so they can make the tyres last to the lap 10 that most people are coming in. We're not really gaining that much on the straight to Leclerc, but we're just so much better in the corners that we just managed to go round the outside of him clean into turn 1. No contact needed, and now we're up into P9. Still got the fastest lap on our medium tyres, and hopefully this undercut works, because we were 3.5 seconds ahead of Hamilton, so we'll see what the gap is when he comes out. But as we head through the S section, we get a much better run through there than Esteban Ocon, but we don't seem to have the straight line speed to get past him immediately. But on the brakes we go round the outside into the stadium section, and now we've got Lance Stroll immediately ahead of us, and he has the slight wobble at the final corner, and this should be an easy move into turn 1, as we all have DRS and he won't. And Hamilton is indeed in the pits, so once we've overtaken Stroll, and we'll be on the back of Jack Aitken after that, then we can work out what our gap is, because Bottas hasn't pitted yet. So we're now up to P3. 2-3 for TSJAwesome, but obviously Aitken still has to pit. He is battling for that P5 position, so the one behind Sergio Perez, because Perez seems to have P4 under control. We look like we're going to set a fastest lap, and Jack Aitken does pull into the pits, and we do set another fastest lap, not by much though. We did get held up by Jack Aitken for a bit, but we'll have opportunities later in the race to set a fastest lap, as everyone has now made their first pit stop. And as we head to the end of lap 12, the gap to Hamilton is 11 seconds, so that undercut has gained us 7.5 seconds on him, or about 7 seconds. But now is the point where he is going to start closing that gap in. So at the end of the stint, which is around lap 20, we'll finally see whether it was worth it to go for the undercut, because Hamilton's now on the soft tyres, and he should be closing us in, because he will have the quicker tyres for this stint of the race, and in the final stint we should be roughly equal. So lap by lap, as we head on to lap 14, he is going to be closing us in, and we're going to just continue going until, until we can really. Lap 22 is our pit lap. And the gap is now 9 seconds to Hamilton. Ideally, we want it to be about 7 seconds. Because if we're going 3.5 seconds in the first stint, then theoretically, our pace, we should have been 3.5 seconds ahead of him in the second stint. So if we can keep the gap above 7 seconds, that's a definite win from the undercut. And as we head on to lap 17, the gap's now back to 8.3 seconds. Hamilton has also pulled away from Bottas this stint as well. Perez is still in P4, clearly, with Sainz in P5, who's battling Max Verstappen and Jack Aitken for that position. Hamilton's now got the gap down to 8 seconds at the end of lap 17. And Jeff gives us the radio message saying that we're going to start losing some tyre grip, which isn't that good as the gap goes down to 7.8 seconds. We actually extend the gap to 8.3 seconds at the end of lap 18, and I think this is where Hamilton's tyres are starting to go off, as he pitted at the end of lap 10 obviously, so it's been on the softs for 8 laps already. And he's going to try and go 10 laps on them. That doesn't mean we're going to have an easy pull away though, and at the end of lap 19 it is 8.8 seconds the gap. Which was about a second gain that lap, which is pretty good. As I believe Hamilton will be coming in at the end of this lap, because his tyre wear will be too high to continue for much longer. And at the end of lap 20 we're going to go past. The gap is now 9.2 seconds, we have extended the gap further. Obviously we can't see where the Hamilton pits because he's quite far behind us, so let's just look for the sign at the top right, and he's decided to stay out for one more lap, it seems, as I'm looking at the mini-map. So, the end of lap 21, he'll probably come to the pits, because Bottas pitted at the end of lap 20, so they swapped it around. Jack Aitken's now in P3, and I assume he will also pit at the end of this lap, at lap 21. But, we managed to extend the gap to Hamilton further, and then at the end of lap 22 we are going to be coming in for another set of medium tyres. We no longer have fastest lap. You'll see as Max Verstappen has that, as he is fighting Jack Aitken and Carlos Sainz in this race, so he is looking decent. But I believe Max Verstappen has gone to the hard tyres, which is why he's got it, because he pitted already and pitted pretty early on to go onto them. And we are going to be, the gap to Lewis Hamilton will be, when it starts going down, it's going to suddenly go down now because of our pits. It's roughly 9 seconds, which is pretty good for us, as there is a yellow flag in sector 1 and Carlos Sainz is out of the race in the McLaren, so Max Verstappen is up to P5 and maybe Jack Aitken can seal that position. But sadly for us, I realised a couple of laps later or something that Jack Aitken, when Carlos Sainz retired, made a bit of contact with him and has picked up a tiny bit of front wing damage on the end plates, and he is going to start dropping down rather than overtaking Max Verstappen. Then lap 24 we do set a fastest lap though. We just wanted to make sure we got all 26 points. And it's exactly what we do, because no one's going to beat that time. And just for the rest of the race, it's just going lap after lap after lap until the end, because we are 12 seconds ahead of Hamilton, and I really don't think he can gain a second lap on us. So it's just about bringing the car home. We'll keep an eye on Jack Aitken though, who is currently just ahead of the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc and Daniel Ricciardo, and as we head on to the end of this lap, it seems that he's lost the position to Charles Leclerc and is now just ahead of Daniel Ricciardo for P7, I believe. And I'm just going to keep an eye on him on the minimap and keep reporting his progress. And he is now indeed just ahead of Daniel Ricciardo still. So he is holding up the position nicely, and maybe he can finish P8 behind both Ricciardo and Leclerc, but it may be pretty hard. We are starting to catch up to the lap traffic, both Nicholas Latifi and Romain Grosjean, as we managed to lap Nicholas Latifi, and shortly after, as we go through the S section, we managed to lap Romain Grosjean on the exit as he will pull over to the side, and just trying to make sure we don't get caught up with any damage ourselves from making contact with any cars that are unnecessary. As Jack Aitken has now indeed been overtaken by Daniel Ricciardo, so hopefully he won't lose any more positions in this race. But there are still 6 laps to go, and he does have a racing point and a Ferrari catching up to him pretty quickly, as we did lose a bit of concentration there and just ran onto the grass, so I just wanted to show you guys that. End lap 30, the gap's now up to 14.5 seconds for Hamilton, and we're about to lap George Russell. So we are just dominating this race. There hasn't really been a challenge since turn 1, when Bottas almost overtook us. Getting to lap 32 now, and Jack Aitken is still in the battle for P8. He is still holding that position for now, but as we head later on in that into the next lap, Jack Aitken looks to be struggling again still, and he is 2 cars just behind him. On lap 33 we lapped Kimi Raikkonen, so we've lapped both Haas cars theoretically, because Magnussen DNF'd, and both Williams cars, and can we lap both Alphas now if we can overtake Giovinazzi at the end? And more importantly for Jack Aitken is how many points can he bring home, as he is now fallen behind Lance Stroll in the other racing points, and Sebastian Vettel is all over the back of him. The end of lap 34, we're still trying to keep ahead and push to get past Giovinazzi. It doesn't matter too much, so I'm not going like full push, but I want to try and lap Giovinazzi as well. That'll be a good end to the race. Meanwhile for Jack Aitken, he is still currently ahead of Sebastian Vettel, but he is struggling to keep ahead, and it looks like they're currently going side by side. We've got 1 lap left and we can see Giovinazzi just in front of us, and by the end of that we are right by him, but I don't think we're quite going to be close enough to lap him, as we're going to come through the final sector though. Jack Aitken has indeed lost the position to Sebastian Vettel, but we are going to come round the final corner, not quite lapping Giovinazzi, but we're going to win the Mexico Grand Prix.
Absolutely awesome, just amazing. Well done. Looks so incredibly happy as they make their way up to the podium. A much deserved victory and a brilliant performance from them all.
So we're up on the podium celebrating. Lewis Hamilton's probably celebrating because Bottas hasn't won the championship today. He's done enough to keep ahead.
That lead at the top of the table has shrunk somewhat today. Let's focus on the driver of the day. Anthony Davidson, who do you pick?
It's got to be Lewis Hamilton. I mean, he pulled off some impressive feats out on the track today, even by his standards.
It's another clear win for Mercedes as they managed to secure the Constructors' title. An incredible performance for the whole team. And with that, we wrap up another weekend of motorsport. But with more races lined up, be sure to join us when we come back with more Formula One.
So we managed to claim all 26 points today by winning and taking fastest lap. Lewis Hamilton takes home P2 just ahead of Valtteri Bottas in P3. Perez has a great race of Racing Point in P4, just ahead of Max Verstappen in P5, who holds off Charles Leclerc in P6, Daniel Ricciardo in P7, Lance Stroll in P8, Sebastian Vettel in P9, and Jack Aitken could only take home P10 in the end after his promising P5 was taken away with some damage from Carlos Sainz. Lando Norris, Esteban Ocon and Alex Albon all don't score for McLaren, Renault and Red Bull. Pierre Gasly ends up taking home P14, and Kvyat is in P15 in the AlphaTauris. And then comes the Alfa Romeos, Haas and Williams, with us almost lapping Giovinazzi, but Raikkonen, Grosjean, Russell and Latifi were all lapped in this race. And the two DNFs in the end were both Carlos Sainz and Kevin Magnussen, as they both had mechanical issues at various points in the race. In the championship, we now jump up to P3 because Sebastian Vettel only scored 2 points this race, and we won the race, obviously. Bottas couldn't quite claim the championship. He would have needed to outscore Hamilton. He would have probably needed to win the race and Hamilton to finish second or something to win the championship today, but he has a 44-point gap and is very likely to win it in Brazil. And then also Perez has overtaken Carlos Sainz, obviously with Carlos Sainz's DNF. Lance Stroll has overtaken Lando Norris, so the Racing Points have just jumped the McLarens, and that means they'll also jump them in the Constructors. Jack Aitken got another point, so he's firmly ahead of Raikkonen now in P14. But hopefully he can get a few more before now and the end of the season, because I don't think we're going to be re-signing him for next season. In the Constructors' Championship, Racing Point are now jumped McLaren, even though the arrows seem to be bugged, because they definitely were behind them going into this race. But it's pretty much the only battles going on at Racing Point v McLaren and AlphaTauri v Alfa Romeo. But AlphaTauri v Alfa Romeo doesn't seem to be that much of a battle, because I don't know if AlphaTauri will be able to score, even though they are the quicker team than Alfa Romeo. So Haas and Williams are still yet to score, so I guess we can say that is still a battle, but I doubt any of them will be breaking their best positions between now and the end of the season, unless we have a really chaotic race at Brazil, because I doubt Abu Dhabi is going to serve up a chaotic race, as it rarely does. So let's get into the post-race interview.
That was an exciting race from our perspective. Let's have yours. It doesn't get much better than a win at this track, does it?
Well, we just get to the great car. We need to improve our aero though, so I'm going to probably make loads of comments about how good the aero is, so the team feels they're doing well, and then we can improve their package for next season. We were definitely underestimated going into this season. I have to say I don't remember making any contact. I made a bit of contact at turn 1, I guess. Other than that, we were at front for the rest of the race, so I don't really understand what you're talking about there.
Right. Well, that's everything.
We managed to gain some acclaim, and Jack Aitken is so close to level 8, so he will definitely go up to level 8 in Brazil. We're almost level 13 as a team as well, and we're almost level 11 as a driver, so that's pretty good news going on. We do pretty well in terms of the amount of laps completed as a team, and we got to 93 but not quite the 100 to get an extra bonus, but we gained quite a bit of cash, which will be used next season. But I am going to leave the episode there, so I'll see you guys next time for the Brazilian Grand Prix.